Hello everyone and welcome back to Chess Traps. This is episode 9 and today's video I'm going to teach you all about the LASKER trap. This is a very deep and beautiful trap that features an under promotion as early as move 7, and in this video I'm going to cover every single question you have about this trap. So it comes after pawn to d4 by white, we play pawn to d5, and white goes pawn to c4, the queen's gambit, and here we play a bit of a dubious reply, pawn up to e5. This is called the Albin counter gambit, and while it is a little bit dubious, I do think it is a bit better than the reputation that it is given. And white's only good reply here that this trap does come out of is to accept our gambit by capturing our e-pawn. All their other responses are kind of meh. I will show just one, which is knight to c3, which is the second most popular move here other than capturing the pawn, at which point I learned a very fun line that I would like to share with you. You capture on d4, white captures back, and now knight to c6. Attacking the queen and gambiting a pawn, so now we've gone from equal material to once again down a pawn, but here you don't care about queen trade, you play bishop to e6, and you actually go into this line, and even though the engine does say that white is slightly better, black wins literally 70% of games here, because if white just goes simple like pawn to e3, the most common move, then now knight to b4, and knight to c2 is unstoppable. So that's a fun line, but back on track right here. After they capture the pawn, we now push up to d4. This is the main line of the Albin. And now this trap comes out of what is the second most popular move for white here, which is pawn up to e3. Now, objectively, this is a pretty decent mistake because now bishop to b4 check will prove to be very strong, and this gets into the actual part of the trap. I do want to show you if they do not play pawn to e3 and fall into the trap, the main line here goes knight to f3. We play knight to c6 here to keep the defense of this very annoying pawn. And now white has a few good options. They can try pawn to a3 to permanently stop the bishop from ever coming to this very nice square and potentially go pawn to b4 and take a lot of queenside space. They can also try pawn up to g3 and go for a fianchetto setup, which is pretty strong because there are no pawns in the way to block the bishop at all. And they can also try the modern line, which is knight to d2 here. The idea to try and go knight to b3 and just win the pawn right away. So those are white's good responses. However, pawn to e3, the second most common move with almost 200,000 games played, is not a very good one because now we play bishop to b4 check. Check their king, and almost everybody here will play bishop to d2, which falls into the trap. I'll also show you one quick line here. They can also play knight to d2, but this is just not very good. It gets in the way, and now we have a pretty immediate way to get a nice advantage. We capture on e3, they capture back, and then we take advantage of this weak diagonal and both of these very weak e-pawns by playing queen to h4 check, pawn to g3, and now queen to e4 here. The knight cannot capture us because it is currently pinned, and we are also attacking both e-pawns, so their only try here to get a fine position is probably knight to f3 to defend this one, but now after a simple knight to c6 here, to now attack this pawn once again, instead of capturing this pawn immediately, is actually the best way to play, and now pawn to a3 is the best line. We get a trade right here. They cannot take back the knight, by the way, because it is still pinned. So captures, once again, we see this pin here, bishop to g2, and after something like knight to d3 here, we have a very good position. Now white would have to move their king, and after like queen takes on c4, the engine says black is definitely better here and borderline winning. And this x-ray here is going to be too strong for white to handle. So that is just one quick example line on why knight to d2 is a pretty bad response, but instead bishop to d2 is much more common. And now the winning move here is capturing on e3. A very surprising line because we blunder our bishop, but blunder is in quotation marks because if they capture, then white is actually now completely winning and they have completely fallen into the trap. So you can skip further ahead into the video and actually find the point where I am talking about this main part of the trap here. But real quick, I also want to talk about two of their other responses here, which are much better than actually capturing the bishop, and if your opponent is more serious, they probably are not going to fall into this trap and play one of those instead. Those two lines are first, capturing the pawn back instead. If they do this, then now we have queen to h4 check, and this is actually very similar to the knight to d2 line, where you once again had this queen to h4 check business. Now once again, pawn to g3 here, queen to e4, attacking the rook, attacking this pawn, and actually also attacking this pawn as well, because the bishop is currently not defending because it is pinned. And white has two fine lines here. The first one is queen to f3, and if they do this, then you simply want to trade bishops. They capture back, and after capturing back on e5, you have a slight advantage here because material equality is restored, and this weak e-pawn is going to be a permanent weakness. The other line that can play is knight to f3, which is a bit better defending this pawn, but now we capture on e3. It is no longer defended. Bishop to e2 for white, and now you simply want to trade bishops, and then just develop knight to c6, finish your development. You have an even material position, but white cannot castle, and because of that, you do have a slight advantage here, as well as this pawn on e5 here still being pretty weak. So that is if they capture back the pawn. There is one more line they can try to play before I want to get into the main juice of the trap, and that is queen to a4 check here, checking our king as well as attacking our bishop. If they play this, now you go knight to c6, defending the bishop, but once again is actually just attacked twice here, so they capture back, and you might think, oh, all hope is lost, but that is not the case, because now you capture on f2 here. Now we're getting this fork, so white is forced to capture back, and now queen to h4 check. Once again, we keep seeing this idea reoccur. Pawn to g3 here, now queen to d4 check, attacking the king as well as attacking this g2 pawn. If they run back to e1, then you do not want to capture on b2, but instead play queen to e4 check here and simply win the rook in the corner like so. And if they instead run to g2, then now we capture on b2. We win the rook like this, bishop b2, we would take the rook. We're completely winning in this position as well. Even though white does have some development, we're up a lot of material. Okay, maybe completely winning was a stretch, but you get what I mean. So those are the two lines if they try to not fall into the trap, but now let's get into the main juice of it. If they capture our bishop, then now they have fallen into the trap. We capture on f2 with our pawn, getting this fork, and in the other line we saw them capturing the pawn, but here this would be absolutely terrible because now nobody is defending their queen, and we can go ahead and just capture it. We're completely winning. So instead, their only real try here is to run up to e2 and keep the defense of this. Now, what would we like to do in this position? We would love to play bishop to g4 check and skewer them like this and simply win their queen. However, white can simply go knight to f3 here. I mean, if we capture, they just capture back, and we're actually just losing here because white is still defending their queen, and we're actually just down a piece here, so that does not work. So you might think, oh well, why not capture the knight first, and then play that? That way the knight can no longer come into check. So you might think, oh, we'll capture, promote, but this does not work either, because this move is actually just too slow. It does not come with a check. Yes, if they capture back, then now bishop to g4 and you are winning, but sadly, they can trade queens first and then capture here, and this is pretty much a dead even position. If anyone has a little advantage here, it is white. Instead of that, what you want to do is the very nice captures and promote to a knight. That way it comes with a check, so they can't just capture and trade queens first. They have to respond to this threat here. If they capture the rook, then we transpose into the other position, bishop to g4 here, and we win the queen very nicely and capture the queen or the bishop. It does not matter. But the most challenging try for them here is to actually not capture and instead walk back to e1. Now, I know the engine is saying here, +8. Black should be completely easily winning here. However, it is not super straightforward. We are up a piece in this position. However, that piece is this knight, which currently has absolutely no way out and is also being attacked by the rook. And you do have a couple of winning moves here. However, by far the most convincing is queen to h4 check. You check the king, and then you have two options here, pawn up to g3 or king to d2. If g3, then we simply have queen to e4 check, and we win the rook very nicely like this. So instead, king to d2 here is once again their only real try, and now you have a very simple knight to c6. And your plan here is actually very simple. You'll get your bishop out, you've gotten your knight out already, and then you'll probably long castle to get your rook on the d8 square and hopefully skewer their king and their queen. So, knight to c6, attack the bishop, it has to move, bishop back to c3, and now we follow that same plan. Bishop to g4 here, attacking the queen, and their best try here is probably queen to e1, and now you do have to be a little careful here. Do not, first off, blunder your queen, but also do not trade queens either, because if we do this, then now our knight actually just has no way out, and because that, we are going to have an advantage still, but is going to be much smaller than if we play the correct move. Speaking of that, the correct move here is long castles. Getting that rook on the open file and attacking the king. Now they have to move their king over, no other real options here. And now you simply want to trade queens. The difference here being that they have to take back the bishop instead of the king. And now you have many wins here. You can get your knight out and safe. However, what is much more convincing, according to the engine, is to actually play rook to d1 check, king moves, and you capture this bishop here. The idea is that after they capture back, the engine just says to develop normally knight to e7, and even though you're only one piece up, the engine gives a massive -12, which is just ridiculous. But also the much more human move here, I would think, is bishop to e2, and you can win an additional exchange using this trick here. If they capture, you capture the rook. If instead, like knight to c3 here, then you capture this rook, they will capture your bishop, and now after captures on a2, you are up 6 points of material here with a completely winning position. So hopefully that answers all of your questions about the LASKER trap. If you have any more, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you next time.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.